The wedding of the dead on a cold autumn evening in Blackwood, England. A lonely graveyard stood at the edge of an abandoned church. The wind whispered through broken headstones, and the moonlight painted everything in pale silver. People in the nearby town avoided that place after sunset. They believed the graveyard carried an old curse. But for Ethan Cole and Lily Morgan, it was the perfect location for their wedding. Not because they loved horror, but because it was the only place they could afford. Ethan was a struggling photographer, and Lily worked at a small antique shop. They had saved money for months, yet every wedding hall in town was too expensive. One evening, while searching online, Lily discovered the abandoned church next to Blackwood Graveyard. The property owner, an old man named Mr. Whitmore, offered it for almost nothing. "There's just one rule," Mr. Whitmore had said in a trembling voice. "The ceremony must end before midnight." Ethan laughed when he heard that. "It sounds like a ghost story." Ah, but Lily noticed something strange. The old man wasn't smiling. Still, they signed the papers. Ugh. The wedding day, the day of the wedding, arrived with dark clouds covering the sky. A cold wind blew through the graveyard, making the trees creak like old doors. A small group of guests gathered near the church entrance. There were only 10 people, close friends and family members. Everyone wore black coats to protect themselves from the chilling air. Lily stepped out of a small car wearing a simple white dress. She looked beautiful, yet nervous. "Are you sure about this place?" her best friend Emma Brooks whispered. Lily forced a smile. "It's just an old graveyard." Nothing more. Inside the church, candles flickered along the walls. The wooden floor groaned under every step. At the altar stood Father Thomas, a quiet priest who had agreed to perform the ceremony. Everything felt normal until the clock struck 10:47 p.m. A sudden gust of wind slammed the church doors shut. The candles trembled, and somewhere outside, a bell rang. But the church bell tower had been broken for years. Strange guests, the ceremony began slowly. Father Thomas spoke the wedding vows while Ethan held Lily's hands. Oh. Just as he asked, "Does anyone object to this marriage?" a loud knock echoed from the main door. Everyone turned. Another knock followed, slower, heavier. Ethan walked toward the door. "Oh, probably someone lost," he said. When he opened it, a tall man stood outside in an old-fashioned suit. His clothes looked dusty, like they hadn't been worn in decades. "I'm here for the wedding," the stranger said calmly. His voice sounded hollow. Ethan hesitated but allowed him inside. Soon after, another figure appeared. Then another. Within minutes, 5 more guests entered the church. No one recognized them. They didn't smile. They didn't speak to anyone. They simply stood in silence, watching the couple. Emma leaned toward Lily and whispered, "Did you invite these people?" Lily shook her head slowly. A chill crawled down her spine. The photographer's discovery, Ethan returned to his position, trying to ignore the strange visitors. As a photographer, he had set up a camera on a tripod to record the ceremony. While adjusting the lens, he noticed something disturbing. Through the camera screen, the new guests looked different. Their faces appeared pale and blurred. Their eyes were dark holes, and their bodies seemed slightly transparent. Ethan blinked and looked directly at them. They appeared normal again. He checked the camera once more. The same horrifying image returned. His hands began to shake. "Lily," he whispered urgently, "there's something wrong." Before she could respond, Father Thomas continued the ceremony. "Repeat after me," the priest said. "I promise to stay with you until death do us part." At that exact moment, all the mysterious guests spoke together. Their voices echoed like whispers from underground. "Death never parts us." The temperature inside the church dropped instantly. Frost formed on the windows. One candle went out, then another, then all of them. Darkness swallowed the room. The truth about the graveyard emergency lights flickered on, casting a weak red glow across the church. The strangers slowly stepped forward. One of them, the tall man who arrived first, removed his hat. His face was gray and cracked like dry soil. "We were married here," he said in a deep, echoing voice. "Every couple who wed in this graveyard joined us." Lily felt her heart pounding. "What do you mean?" she asked. The man pointed toward the cemetery outside. Look!" The church doors creaked open by themselves. A cold wind rushed in, carrying the smell of wet earth. Through the doorway, Lily saw dozens of figures rising from the graves, men in old suits, women in torn wedding dresses, children holding wilted flowers, all walking slowly toward the church. Emma screamed. Father Thomas dropped his Bible, and Ethan grabbed Lily's hand. "We have to leave," he said. But when they ran to the back door, it refused to open. The handle felt frozen solid. Midnight approaches. The old clock on the wall began to tick loudly. 11:57 p.m. The ghostly guests formed a circle around the couple. Their movements were slow, mechanical, like puppets controlled by invisible strings. Father Thomas shouted prayers, but his voice trembled. "Oh, please," Lily cried. "We didn't know about this curse." The tall ghost stepped closer. "Neither did we," he replied. Suddenly, the ground beneath the church shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Cracks spread across the walls. Outside, the wind howled like 1,000 voices screaming at once. 11:59 p.m. The clock ticked louder. Ethan looked at Lily with desperate eyes. There must be a way out. Then he remembered Mr. Whitmore's warning. The ceremony must end before midnight. Ethan realized something terrifying. They had never completed the vows. The final decision, with seconds remaining, Ethan grabbed Lily's hands and spoke loudly. "I refuse this marriage," he declared. The room fell silent. Everyone stared at him in shock. Living and dead. Lily's eyes filled with tears. But Ethan continued. "I love you," he said softly. "And I want us to live." The clock struck midnight. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a deafening scream erupted from the ghosts. Their bodies twisted and dissolved into black smoke. The church walls cracked and the floor trembled violently. A blinding flash of light filled the room. When the light faded, the ghosts were gone. The doors burst open. Fresh air rushed inside. The aftermath police arrived shortly after receiving emergency calls from nearby residents who heard the screams. They found Ethan and Lily sitting outside the church, covered in dust but alive. The building behind them had partially collapsed. Tombstones lay broken across the ground. Investigators searched the area but found no sign of the mysterious guests. Only one strange detail remained. Inside the church ruins, officers discovered an old stone plaque hidden beneath the floor. It listed the names of couples married there over the past century. At the very bottom of the list, 2 empty spaces waited, as if expecting new names. 1 year later, exactly 1 year after the incident, Ethan and Lily held a small wedding ceremony in a bright city hall far away from Blackwood. Sunlight filled the room. Friends laughed. Music played. Everything felt safe until the photographer handed them their wedding album. Ethan flipped through the pages slowly. Every photo looked normal, except the last one. In the background, behind the smiling guests, stood several pale figures wearing old-fashioned clothes, watching, waiting. And in the center of them was the tall man in the dusty suit, smiling. The end.